prestigious group of theater leaders here today with us. And thank you all so much for coming, and thank you to Sacred Fools for hosting us today. A few points of order just before we get started. Our moderator will be leading the panel in about 60 minutes of discussion, and then we will open it up to the audience for about 30 minutes of questions. After we are done, we will need to clear out of the space very quickly, as is the way with Fringe, because we will have somebody coming in right after us to load in. So we will want to talk with you at Fringe Central down the road. If you'd like to continue any conversations, we can do it there. We will also be recording this panel on our YouTube channel, which is YouTube.com/Hollywood Fringe. If you want to share that with anybody, let them know about the cool things that we're going to be discussing here today. That would be great. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists out of order, but in alphabetical order. So hopefully you guys can raise a hand when that happens. First, we've got Paul Cruz, the Artistic Director for the Wallis Annenberg Center for the Performing Arts.
I feel so, yeah.
Carolyn Elliot, the Director of Programming for the Broad Stage. Ben Hill, the Festival Director for the Hollywood Fringe Festival. Andy Horwitz, the Director of Programs for the Skirball Cultural Center. Cristina King, the Co-Director of Callejon, Salao Productions. Alan Moon, the Director of Touring and Artist Management at David Lieberman Artist Representatives and Artistic Director of Santa Ana Sites. And Celine Santiago, the Programming Director for the Latino Theater Company at the Los Angeles Theater Center. And finally, our moderator, Ben Johnson, the Director of Performing Arts for the City of Los Angeles Department of Cultural Affairs. Go ahead and get started. Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to see everybody. Thank you so much for coming and fighting this traffic on this hot day. And thanks to the panel for coming here on this hot day as well. This is a conversation that I'm really excited that we're having. About a year ago, I met with Ben and Can from the Hollywood Fringe, and it's exciting to see a homegrown LA Fringe Festival really mature and grow and explode. And I just heard that you're breaking all records this year. So congratulations to that. That's not necessarily easy. We're on the home stretch. This is the final weekend of 3 weeks of over 350 artists performing, and it's a real momentous thing that's happening here. And it's so big and so exciting that it's always my question, like, where is the rest of the world, and are they flying in to come to see this Fringe? So that's how I started my conversation over a year ago, which was like, all of this incredible theater work is happening here, and there's so many incredible artists and designers and actors and playwrights, and I've just found that really fascinating, that it's this really robust scene here, and that we were having this major festival, and I wanted it to be on the radar of all of the rest of the people I know throughout the world. The same parallel universe is this whole new rise of presenting organizations that now are in Los Angeles. 15 years ago, there was just like one. But now they're all over. And so this incredible panel here sort of represents some of the best thinking in the presenting field. And so I really wanted to force or propose a conversation between the presenting institutions of Los Angeles and how they think about theater in LA, and how the LA theater community thinks about themselves in relationship to what could potentially be opportunities. But this particular panel, each one of these panelists also has an expertise in theatrical curation in all forms. It could be multidisciplinary, spoken word, performance art, classic, contemporary, producing stuff. So, and I know that many of them travel to festivals throughout the world. They've presented work. They see a lot of work. They know the entire international presenting scene. So I thought this would be a really helpful and healthy context to have a conversation for the local theater community about how this world works and how it works now for each of them. And then we'll open it up to questions as well. But quickly before we do that, I'd love to see, if you wouldn't mind raising your hands, who here sort of is an LA theater artist, actor, director, playwright? So most of you, which is really, really exciting. So thank you for the incredible work that you do. And so I just wanted to start right into the questioning. And this is just a sort of a dinner table conversation where no one's really presenting. We're just sort of posing questions like I'm having a glass of wine with these folks. And
I know where to
So we're having like some sort of provocative things, and then I'll throw on the table. So as respected theater makers, and this is a serious question, as respected theater presenters of theater in various forms, each of you, how do you currently find your theater ideas and the artists that you work with? Is it word of mouth? Do you attend festivals? Is it relationships that you bring to the table? If each of you could talk a little bit about your individual process of finding the theater that you book and present, and what kind of work you are looking for your venues now. A couple minutes per person. Anybody can put Carolyn, you look like you're talking.
Okay, so there's a variety of ways that we look for theater. And the most traditional is that an agent will reach out to me and say, I have this extraordinary property. It's going to be performing here, here, and here. Will you come and see it? And they encourage me to see it. I fall in love and then go, oh my God, it's so expensive. One of the things that I really try to do is find partners that can co-present or help build a tour, because it's often not sustainable to do it just ourselves. So over the past couple of years, we've started working on developing relationships with theaters across the United States. Arena Stage in DC, for example, is a wonderful partner. We're actually presenting their show, Born for This. It's a gospel musical opening up in July. But that takes about 2 years typically to make something happen. And then on the flip side, I go to the Edinburgh Fringe most summers and find the most amazing, groovy, small shows that I bring over. And again, I try to find partners. I work with the California Presenters, which is an organization of presenters all up and down the California coast. They go as far east as Scottsdale, Arizona, not technically California, but, and we all talk to each other about artists, and so it's an opportunity to try to get fellow artists involved. I could talk about this for like an hour and a half, so someone else should talk.
Okay. Thank you, Ben. Just to give a little context, because I don't live in LA. I'm from Mexico City. I'm obviously not native from Mexico City, but I feel that I'm Mexicana por convicción. I'm Puerto Rican by birthright, I guess. My mom is Puerto Rican. My dad is a Texan from Dallas, Fort Worth, of Scotch-Irish background. All of this, why am I telling you, influences how I look at work, how I work with artists, and how I feel about the aesthetics that I present, the context in which I'm presenting, and about who I am, frankly. So I've been in Mexico City for about 20 years, doing a number of different projects, smaller events, larger events, programming both from the nonprofit perspective and also from the commercial perspective in music and theater. And for me, so I don't take up too much time, the essence of why I do what I do and why I look for artists and work that jibe with me and that have synergy with me. And I think that theater is one of the most immediate ways that one human being can share and get the sense of who another human being is, of who another human being is, of what that human being is like. And I think the immediacy of theater is how that is communicated. I think that when I'm looking for work and when I'm thinking through a season or a project, I'm always trying to obliterate the barrier between the I and the we, the me and the you and the other. I'm very interested, I'm most comfortable in the performance art realm for that reason. My radar is on the artist and the creator as the catalyst for, as the communicator of social issues or advancing social problems, making connections, harnessing that energy when I'm looking at harnessing that creative energy in a particular space or place where it all comes together, where you are actually transcending culture, you're transcending language, you're talking about identity, you're talking about your identity not only an ethnic identity or a cultural, the cultural including your ethnicity, your gender, your aesthetic. I view my work as kind of a cultural DJ cartographer, okay? So I'm interested in multiple forms and how they mix, and a lot of transdisciplinary work in multiple aesthetics. My tastes are broad. I guess I should be more specific. Okay, so I go to a lot of festivals and I see work, but for me to really present the work, I need to feel it. I watch a lot of the dynamics in an audience and in the public, what's going on, what's happening, what energy is going on in that live setting, in that moment, the convivencia of living together, of convening, of solidarity that I think theater brings to the table. And I think our work as DJs, as cartographers, is to make that happen in each event that we do.
Just remind me of the question again. Was it
What's your process of
finding?
finding
Yeah. It's just that you've taken me off on another track.
Oh,
So
sorry.
I was. It was making me think about other things. I mean, I think I've just been in LA for a year, and I've been artistic director of the Wallis for a little bit longer. I was flying in and out for 6 months trying to get a program of work put together before I arrived, so that last April when I landed, I had to announce a season in May. I wanted that season to be my season and not be a year with someone else's work. So I had to make a bunch of decisions very quickly about what I thought that venue, what I wanted to do with the venue in Beverly Hills, which, having been running a company called Knee High for 12 years, where we basically built work in a field in Cornwall, you couldn't get more polar opposites in some ways. And that work had traveled the world. And I think, curating a company which is touring, you can choose whatever you want to do, and you can make it however you want to make it, and then hopefully people will want to buy it. When you're curating a venue, I think it flips the other way. And I was trying to work out what I wanted to say as an artistic director in Beverly Hills, what I thought an audience would want to see, but also what I thought an audience wouldn't know they wanted to see, but I felt they should see. So it's trying to find a balance always with all those different things. And Joe, who's sitting in the front here from BAM, I went to see him right at the beginning of my time, and I actually, he may not remember this, but I said, look, Joe, I'm making some decisions on instinct at the moment, just on instinct. And Joe said, well, what else have you got, dear boy? And it resonated with me. I actually thought, you're right. You've sometimes just got to make some choices, and they're instinctive based on what you believe you should be doing. So for me at the moment, I've then gone out and thought, I've tried to get the balance of a season, which is work that I like, but also work I think balances the other work that we're doing, so that we're always trying to find as broad an audience as possible with good quality work. So an example of this season, where I brought The Encounter, which was a show that when I talked about it 18 months ago, nobody had heard of it. They said, what, the title, I've never heard the title, who's in it? Oh, don't know that, but all the same questions. And I said, no, this is an amazing piece of work. Even a month before that show was opening, we didn't know if we sold tickets enough to pay for it. And then it just took off. And it made me realize that you have to hold on to those instincts sometimes, to even if everyone tells you you're wrong, and sometimes you are. But it is. So I would go out and look for work like that and see it and just be blown away and think I've got to bring it. I'd also deal with the relationships I've built up over the 30 years in the UK. I would use those relationships. There were people who were coming in to work with me. And then I was determined to build new relationships in LA. That was the thing I was keen to do, we also produce work at the Wallis. So one of my remits was to build an audience within the industry anyway, build a group of artists who wanted to come and work there that were based in LA, and it became a resource for those across all the genres that we've got, theatre, dance and music. And that's, for me, very important that the national, the local, the national and international was part of my thinking as the core of what we were trying to do, and build a range of work with a range of artists that brought in a range of audience. So so I was trying to find things instinctively. I was just finding things that I knew and had seen, and I was working with people I'd had relationships with. Those were the sort of three things, I think.
I'm going to go to Celine to talk a little bit about the festival you're curating this fall and about how you're thinking about finding the work that you're presenting.
So, with the Latino Theater Company at the Los Angeles Theater Center, if you haven't been there, you should come. We have 5 theaters that range from like 75 seats to 500 seats. We have 3 studios. We have this amazing lobby. There is a lot of space to fill. So I say this because we both produce and present. And in regards to the theater festival that we have coming up in the fall, it's called Encuentro de las Américas. It is an international theater festival. Half of the companies are from the United States, and the other half are from the Americas that come from Canada all the way down to Latin America. That includes Cuba. And the way we did that is that we are doing this in partnership with the Latinx Theater Commons. And so we devised a committee that was made up of 12 people, 6 of which were the Latino Theater Company, and the other 6 are from the Latinx Theater Commons, which is a volunteer-based organization that really works to advance the Latino theater community nationally and internationally. So it was a mix of people from all over the United States. And we put out a call. We put out this massive call saying, we are having this amazing 3-week, I keep calling it a party, as I'm sure you can attest to. It turns into a giant party. So it's theater, it's music, it's art, it's everything. We have an 8-floor building, which you wouldn't know if you just walked into the lobby and you're like, oh my God, this is so big. But no, but really guys, it's like super big. It's like 8 floors big. So we put out this call, and we received many, many applications from all over the Americas, and we sat down and we voted on all of them. We devised a criteria upon which we wanted to hit certain markers, and a big part of the marker was that we wanted to find companies that fell in line with our mission. And that fell in line with what we really wanted the festival to be. And ultimately what we want are to pair up companies from the United States and internationally, and also have them create work together, which will be a devised piece of work that will be part of the theater festival. So encounter, to come together and have conversations, really kind of the impetus of this festival, and how we based our criteria and selection process. Outside of the theater festival, I have people like straight up cold email me, cold call me, I want you to read this, blah, 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 which is chill. Sometimes I'll read it and be like, whoa, this is actually really amazing. You guys, we should do this. And sometimes it's partnership. Sometimes it's, committing to a certain individual or a certain artist that we're like, you know what, I really believe in the work that you're doing. I'm committing to this play that you are writing. We will do it in 2 years. Let's jam on this. So our work is really, or the way we approach work is really kind of grassroots and also not grassroots. I don't personally go to a ton of festivals and look at work in that way. I have seen everything. I think you mentioned Instagram. Maybe somebody did, but I swear to God, I hit up Instagram and I'm like, what are people doing? What are people presenting? What are they showing? And I just really stay up on social media and see what's happening. I find that for me, aside from actually going to theater and seeing shows, that's actually a really great way to find out what's happening in the world and to start noticing certain trends that's happening. Like, is everybody moving in one direction? Okay, then I'm not gonna go over there. I wanna see what's happening over here, because that's what's interesting to me, because everyone's already doing this thing over here. So, yeah. Sorry if that was a long answer.
Really informational, thank you. Ben, why don't you speak to this question?
Oh, sure. And first of all, Ben, thank you so much for organizing this. And all of you, it's truly an honor to have all of you with us today. I think it makes us all on the staff very happy to see your faces today. So thank you so much for joining us. I think my answer is going to be kind of odd for every question you ask, because we don't curate. We have no, people in the office having fun or voting or any sort of methodology to choose what shows come out. And I think that gives us a unique place in the broader theatrical ecosystem. It's been our goal over time to become something of the Sundance of theater, where folks like yourselves, so you don't even need to go all the way to Edinburgh. You've got one right here. We have 375 shows that you can see, and a lot of them are just fantastic. A lot of them are from emerging artists, from touring artists, from established Los Angeles theaters. Back in the day when we started planning this about 10 years ago, 3 years before our first festival, we relied on the if you build it, they will come methodology. And we spent 3 years building it, not just the professional partnership framework, but also an actual technology framework that would allow us to do outreach and allow people to come in from out of the state, out of the country, tour all the venues that are available to them, choose their venue, register with the festival without ever actually putting pants on, basically, as you could register for the Hollywood Fringe Festival. And this systemic framework approach ended up really working for us. And due to our model, we have a very sustainable model in the sense that each of the individual venues, much like Edinburgh, are, and unlike most Fringe festivals in North America, are completely independently operated. Like this venue, for example, is run by the Fools, and we love them desperately for it. We have several presenters here in the audience today, like Matt Quinn, I think does about 25 venues, and he's over there right now. And we've developed this partnership through everything. So we don't do recruiting, we don't do outreach. We don't do specific outreach. We don't go to individual festivals and say, bring us your people. We build it, and people come. And because of this model, we grow and grow every year, and that's terrific. And we hope, as I said, it becomes a framework for you guys to come here and see shows and to select them for your festivals, for your seasons. And that's been the goal. So I'm going to make my answer uncharacteristically concise, and there we go.
And I will attest to how you present your festival. So when I was talking to Ben, I was like, okay, you got to tell me the top 5 things to see. And then they're like, we won't, because we don't advocate for only a couple of projects. We treat everybody equitably. And I'm like, well, just how we sort of generally work as curators is like we just want to know from really smart, informed people what we have time to go see. So that's sort of a key thing about we really rely on our colleagues to tell us a lot of what's exciting or what's exceptional in any festival format or anything at all. And
can I just say what's extraordinary about Edinburgh that because of the design of our city is difficult. When you're at a festival in Edinburgh, you run into people walking down the street who are seeing shows. So you can literally, while you're having lunch, sit with people in a cafe and go, so what have you seen that you loved? And literally come away with 8 people have told you to go see Counting Sheep. So you're like, right, I'm seeing Counting Sheep. Whereas when I look at the Fringe Festival, I'm like, I don't know where to begin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating thing.
Yes. Sorry, jumping in. When we sketched out how the festival was going to work, I think there was a Los Angeles Fringe in the early '80s, and that was the entire city, right? That's unapproachable. And we realized we didn't want to do that, so we've made all the theaters, all 30-some theaters, are within about a square-mile region. Everyone who's seeing shows, 'cause I've been to Edinburgh too, I know exactly what you're talking about. Everyone who's seeing shows will have a button. I think a lot of people in this audience have a button too. So as you are walking down the road, or if you're at Fringe Central, which is like a social community hub sort of thing, there are a lot of those conversations happening. And I think that most people see shows through this word of mouth, talking to strangers, that sort of thing. So we say the easiest way to find out what shows to see, come to Fringe Central, find someone and ask them. And they will absolutely tell you.
So we're finding some common ground here.
Yeah.
Well, I think so. I have like a million things to say, and concise has never been my strong point, but I'll do my best.
Speak the truth, in.
Well, because you just said word of mouth. Like in all the years I've been this, I've sat down with countless marketing professionals, and at the end of the day, the only thing that's ever brought anybody to see a show is word of mouth. It's just that simple. And so when you say how do we find stuff, I do say it's all relationships. And before I keep talking about myself a little more, I just want to say to that point, there's a lot of theater artists here, and I guess So I sort of cut my teeth in the Fringe. I went to the Edinburgh for the first time in 1989. I moved to Seattle in 1990 and was part of the first Fringe, I think actually in the United States for the first couple years there. And I spent 7 years at a place called Performance Space 122 in the East Village in New York. And this is actually to the artists, and this is a practical thing, which is like know the venue you're approaching. Because if you do try and find out who the people are inside, but you can certainly know enough by looking at their program. Go there, see shows there, look at what they do. Because if you do like mime and you're taking your show to a place that doesn't do mime, then you're just wasting everybody's time. Have good video, have good pictures, don't lie. You know, like have good materials and know where you're going. Try and find the place that's going to be simpatico with you, where like you're going to share values, or you're going to share aesthetics, you're going to have, where you think that you're actually going to have a good relationship with them as a venue. Because when I look back over the 20 some odd years that I've been doing this, it's all relationships. I'm really delighted to be able to look back at my time at PS 122, and it felt like it was the locus of this incredibly dynamic community. And to this day, like the first thing that I moved here 18 months ago, and the first thing I did was basically call up everyone I knew and say like, what should I see in LA? Who should I meet in LA? And by the way, I'm out here. If you're ever out here, let me know, because I'll put on a show with you. And on Facebook and everything. And I just feel like you can't underestimate the importance of relationships. And all theater, all performance by definition is local, because it only works when when there's human beings in the same space at the same time. You know, it's kind of like in space over time, right? And that's how it works. So you have to build something that's deeply local, that's deeply embedded in the relationships and the dynamics and the sort of, you know, encuentro between the us, and then figure out as an artist, how is this going to work out if I take it out in the world? By the way, thank you. I saw Encounter in Edinburgh in 2015, and nobody believed. I was like, this is the greatest show I've ever seen in my life, and no one believed me. Finally, it came here. I was like, thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you, by the way, I saw Diane Rodriguez's show, which was like wonderful. They have a great space. Go check there. I mean, it's just an honor to fucking be.
You are allowed to curse at the Fringe Festival.
No, it's just there's some really great talent here. It's a really great time to be in LA, and I guess I think that's it. Yeah, just relationships and go see. Oh, I when I was in New York for about a decade, I saw like 5 shows a week and wrote about it. There's no better way to learn what's going on as an artist, or feel a part of a community as an artist, or as a presenter, then go see work all the time. And I know it's really hard here. That's my hardest thing moving here, was like, I'm used to going out 5 nights a week and seeing shows. And now I'm lucky if I can get out, you know, yeah, 1 night or 2 weeks. Oh, and people have missions. So Paul has a mission, Carolyn has a mission, I have a mission, our institutions have missions. So that's another thing to think about, is like, sometimes we have responsibilities. There may be a show that I love, that I'm like, I would do that in a heartbeat, but it's just actually not gonna work where I work.
Thank you. Now, I want Alan to talk, but Alan has a unique role, which is that he is not only a site-specific presenter in Santa Ana, like sort of starting an organization. Oh, it's been going on for 3 years now?
Yeah, almost 4.
4? But he's
Almost
also
4.
been an agent in this world of presenting, and I would love for you to speak to, if you can look through this topic through that context of when you're trying to sell theater to presenters, what's the feedback you get from people as you're trying to sell it? It's just some feedback to give to this particular
I think there's
audience.
a step before that in our process of selecting artists to appear on the roster, and we're a these are mostly multidisciplinary presenters we have all disciplines: theater, dance, music, and circus, and now a choral project. So when it comes to theater, and to a greater or lesser degree to all the mediums, there's kind of three channels that we work in. And the university-based presenting system in the United States, a lot of them have highly subsidized programs that have a mission to connect some of the academic goings-on to the arts. And so sometimes we'll look at projects that can be viewed with a different lens towards some of the areas of academic study on campus. We also work with festivals around the world. And I haven't had as much success bringing American theater to festivals. There's a handful of companies who I think really work on that circuit, because festivals kind of operate in a way where, there's like a very vibrant festival market in Australia, and they have to look at, if I'm going to bring in a project from outside of our country, we have to not have it here. It has to be a very unique, distinct voice. And so, given English language, there's not a ton of opportunities for that, at least in the projects that I've worked on. And I'm also starting to develop relationships with regional theaters, and regional theaters they like to see themselves and talk about themselves as producers. And in fact, many times if I encounter someone, I'll maybe talk about a project, and their first response is like, "Oh, I'm a producer. I don't present." And then, but I've kind of broken that down. And I think I've broken that down in one instance where, let's say they have a season of 10 shows, and they probably have to subsidize those shows. And so I say, well, why don't you just produce 9 shows? Take a project that you can really get behind. And instead of, your $300,000 budget, well, maybe this is a $150,000 budget when you add in the fee, the marketing, everything. And so you've already, from the beginning, have a little extra money to apply to those other shows. So I think that's one way that we've had a little bit of success within finding regional theaters that want to participate as a presenter as well. Now, on the other hand, I also started a program called Santa Ana Sites, which started in my loft, and I did 3 shows in a loft, and with the intention of, in that area of downtown Santa Ana, there was a lot of vacant buildings, and the architecture was kind of like downtown Pasadena, is when most of that city was built. So there was a lot of these vacant places, a warehouse, and a very creative, vibrant community. And so I aligned with some real estate developers and had most of the project funded by 1 or 2 people, corporations. But I don't have kind of this ongoing institution to maintain, which is lovely in some sense, because as it relates to, what do I choose? Well, I don't have to plan a season a year and a half, 2 years, 6 months. I've booked things 6 weeks. And I have to find a space. So a qualifier for me, is it a work that I can take and put it in an area that doesn't have this? And can it exist without that? And sometimes, I think audiences that go into those environments are very forgiving. And so a lack of something doesn't come off as a blemish, but actually can come off as an enhancement almost. And I think one last thing, in the work that I'm allowed to present in non-traditional spaces where it's not like audience and stage, I think the audience is really more receptive to more challenging work and newer ideas. You don't get the, well, what does it mean? They never say that. And it's not like all of the work that I present in that arena some of it can be fairly accessible, some of it can be a little more challenging, we'll say, but always they're hungry for something that's just simply different because they're in a different space.
I'm going to pivot to a new topic, which is a little bit about how do you, I want you to think about all of our festivals in our world and what newspapers and reviews and websites you go to. And think about that in terms of how you look at the work that you're finding. And I only say that because I'm very cognizant of sort of this next provocative question I'm about to ask, which is, how do you think our field looks at LA when it comes to the theater scene? Because there's this huge, rich, wild, robust, vibrant scene here, but I don't see our field necessarily looking towards LA to find its product to book. And it's not that there's bad theater here at all, it's just that, and this is with dance, this is with music, except for visual art. And there's something unique about, which is changing as we speak. Now LA is becoming like the buzz within our whole world. What do you think is the reason why we've been able to easily just sort of like not look to LA for our work? And maybe you're having different experience than I am. So I'm just sort of talking, I'm making big assumptions, but there's this thing where there's a lot of theater out here, but nobody's coming here, at least as far as I can tell. Thoughts?
I mean, that's an interesting one for me because when I left England, a lot of people said, "Where, you're going to America? Where, LA? Why?" Oh, and that was a little bit of a surprise. But for me, I actually think that LA, from the outside anyway, it has changed in the last few years and is changing. And I was very excited when I did come into LA. I think because the Wallis is a multi-genre space as well. For example, dance is I think taking off in LA, and we are with the work we're trying to do and we're presenting 50% of the work has to be LA-based companies because I think that people are looking to LA a little bit more and within the dance world now, and we've got 3 companies next season. We've got LA Dance Project coming to residency. We've had 2 companies out of the 4 this year, and we've got young choreographers like Jacob Jonas, coming through. And I gave him a big stage. At the point when I gave it to him, he had never done that size stage. Now he's taking off. Jacob's not going to be everywhere. So I think that, for example, dance really is taking off. One of the other things with Knee High, when we were touring all over the world. I mean, we did all the Australian festivals, but we came to America, we went around America, and there was a sense that things were happening in LA. Even when I was in New York, we were presenting work at Snan's Warehouse, and Susan at Snan's was saying, people are leaving New York and going to LA, and there was a real sense that something was beginning to take off here. So I find it exciting, and then I arrived in April last year, and within about the first few weeks, or maybe before I even arrived, I was one of my trips in, I went to the Ovation Awards and just looked around that auditorium and saw how many people were in that room, and I thought, my goodness, this is really exciting. So, and then music again, as another genre, there's so much beginning to happen. We've got Wild Up coming to us next season, for example. There's so many LA-based international musicians that we want to bring in, as well as bringing in people from outside. So I think, and
what you're saying also is that the success of one genre actually feeds into the success of the other ones.
I think so. I mean, the visual arts is obviously the thing that's been, people talked about that for a long time with LA, and the Philharmonic the LA Phil is now they say is the greatest orchestra in the country, which I think is great. So I think that the arts are feeding everything. And it's interesting, when I arrived, people said to me, "Who are your competitors?" And I said, "I don't know, I haven't got any, but who's, and I said, I actually don't see it that way. And the way I see it is that, if you've got a football league of 3 teams and you've got a football league of 20, which is the more interesting football league? And I want to be in the one with 20. So the more centres there are, the more theatres, the more performing arts places, the more work that's happening, it just generates more work. And so I want to be part of a very vibrant scene. So I think it's great that there's more theatres popping up, there's more work happening.
Assistant chomping at the bit here.
So I actually wanted to share some success stories with partnering with local theater. My first thought was, well, if it's just been reviewed by the LA Times, it's a challenge for us with my overhead to present a work, right away. Like, it takes a while. But we have a really vibrant relationship with Impro Theater. They are actually doing 10 performances at our venue next season, or this season. They're presenting almost all of their genres, one a month throughout the season. And what we're working towards is partnering with local companies that are aligned with our mission. And then when we program, our sort of big thing from somewhere else, we're really conscious of not replicating what's here in LA. For example, we brought the Asongo Ensemble from South Africa, and they did a production of The Magic Flute with a marimba orchestra. I don't think you're going to find that in the local LA scene. So we're really conscious about that as we program things that come in from the outside.
I think it's to echo Paul, I think it's a really exciting time here. I think there's a lot of energy and a lot of creativity. I think there's a lot of people working across disciplines, which is super interesting. I kind of feel like it's, and not that the theater scene hasn't been here for a long time, but I feel like there's something going on where it's adolescent almost. Like, people are finding new things, and like, it's a really interesting time to watch. It feels like we're on the verge of something really flourishing even more. From my perspective at the Skirball, I don't have a theater like this. Like, I don't have one actually. So when I'm looking at local artists to work with, my main thing is like, can you do site work? Because we have this beautiful campus. Can you do it like a Fringe show? Can you load it in and load it out in like a couple hours? Because I have a lot of event spaces that you kind of have to be able to do. But I also have a mission, right? Which is, I know I've said that a bunch, but which is like our it's sort of in very broad terms, sort of like multi-culti, inclusive, equitable, social justice-y. So, which I say lightly, but I take very seriously. So when we're trying to figure out who we're going to partner with in the community, that's something that we think about a lot. And personally, like, it's like balancing this aesthetic thing where like I'm not personally super excited about sitting in an audience and watching somebody do something. I'm more curious about like conversation-based things, or something that's sort of making me, like you were talking about being in the room where you all were, like, so Alan was talking about it. So, but it's an exciting time to be in LA, and I think that like we'll see how long the real estate market allows people to, experiment with storefronts, but maybe it'll drive people to do more site work. The weather certainly supports it, and
I think you asked the question of how can, or why aren't, nationally people looking at LA theater, and I think really the more important question might be some of these institutions, these respected institutions, what can they do to go simply beyond just programming a local artist, to have maybe a more participatory role in producing and providing commissioning support. So, and then with the idea in mind, to then put it out there in the market. And I think that's, it's that, it happens here and there, but I think it's something that's what can really help local LA theater get out there.
I think to add on to what Alan is saying, I think what can we do, aside from institution, as cultural workers? I think that LA to me is kind of from an outsider perspective, which I now have, and kind of an insider perspective, and also coming from my own background from a colonized background. Puerto Rico is a colony. It's abandoned, and it is a part and yet not a part of these great United States or whatever. So all of that, I think it's, from my perspective in Mexico and the artists that I'm working with and my own colleagues, LA, it's urgent for us to be doing more of a continuum of of a coming and going, a back and forth of more work and more perspectives from Mexican dramaturgs, artists, ¿cómo se dice? Scenic design, scenographers. I mean, you probably don't know it. You know, Mexicans, and we're good at building. We build things. We're really good at building. We have decorative arts and our food, and it's all very Baroque and very layered and intense and wonderful and violent. We're living very violent moments. And all that needs to be, we don't have a national identity, a national theatrical identity. We have multiple identities because every state in Mexico is its own world. And what I've seen over the years is that while we speak about how Los Angeles has this fundamental Mexicano population, Chicano, which in Mexico, the Mexicans don't really understand who the Chicanos are. The Chicanos aren't really getting the conversation with the Mexicanos. I'm kind of in the middle. I'm white, I'm not white, I'm Afro-Caribbean. All that's going on. And I think LA is in a great position and a great place for us to have a conversation, an artistic conversation, to move ideas, to establish those dialogues that we aren't even having in Mexico. It's so hard for a theater company in Mexico to have more than a month run, for example. Espérate, we'll go back. It's hard to even be a theater company in Mexico, to be a stable, sustainable company. A lot of projects are pulled together for a run, and then the artists, the tech staff, everybody disbands until the next project. We need more sustainability on our end there. And one way to achieve that sustainability and move the dialogue forward, because we've been hearing about cultural diversity for 20 years or more, yet we voted for Trump. You know, well, I know we didn't, and I certainly didn't. And I didn't vote for my Mexican president either, because I vote in both countries, and they're both useless, Trump, Peña Nieto. But I think, sorry. Glad I'm not being. Anyway, but going back to theater, I think that we should really find ways, and in Mexico too, to help as a cultural worker, our companies move forward. There are 5 companies that are known among presenters in this part of the world, and this part of the border, 5 or 6 companies where we have in theater, we have social theater, political theater, indigenous theater, all kinds of aesthetics that are just not being moved, not being communicated, not being seen, not being articulated. And I wonder why sometimes the culture, I find it hard to see, but I think LA is positioned now, more so actually than a Miami or a New York, to become that receptor, that catalyst of taking that conversation forward.
Radical. On that point, the Latino Theater Company is extremely, extremely focused and mission-driven on really representing Los Angeles. Like, we are Los Angeles. The season that we just closed out was all world premieres by Los Angeles writers, like every single one of the shows. And aside from the theater festival that we're moving into next season, you know, if you look at our season in general from year to year, it's probably gonna be 90%, you know, folks from Los Angeles. And that is something that we really strive to do. You know, so that's why, you know, for me, when I do have those folks hitting me up and cold calling or whatever, like, I really do take into consideration, like, are you from Los Angeles? That's not like my #1 priority, but it is a priority to me because that is very close to our mission. And especially representing Latinos in Los Angeles is a huge part of our mission. I mean, we are the Latino Theater Company. And so, you know, it is very important to us that folks who don't often get to see themselves on stage or participate in art making on a large event, in a larger venue, get to have those opportunities with us. And, you know, with Latinos being, you know, now the majority in Los Angeles, it's kind of like, oh yeah, duh. Like, why don't we see more of us on stage and making art and doing different things and finding opportunities for ourselves and for each other? So in regard to that, yes, you know, we are very focused on creating Los Angelino art.
So I'm from the East Coast, I think some people on this panel are, and the East Coast theater tends to be defined. There is a defined theater scene, whereas over here, the metaphor that I use is the Wild West. undefined. At any point, you could be in a tavern and there'll be a shootout, but it's actually a piece of immersive theater, something along those lines. And like I am frustrated constantly with theater in Los Angeles being described within the context of the industry of film and television, of like all of the theater here, or there are showcases, chances for people to be discovered and get a real paying job in theater and television. And when I moved here, I had that same bias. Like, I'll admit it, I had that same bias. And as I think the purpose of your question is that a lot of people have that bias. But then you actually move here and you see the theater here. And we have almost 2,000 theater artists participating in the Fringe this year. And when we're talking on the street in Fringe Central in theaters, the conversation isn't about film and television. It isn't about getting that, you know, theatrical or commercial agent. The conversations are about making great art on the stage and beyond. And I think it's to echo what everyone else is saying, it's a very exciting time in theater in Los Angeles right now, because there is no definition. We are right now defining Los Angeles in the realm of the performing arts. And frankly, I would much rather be a part of that than being a cog on the Broadway machine. But that's just my opinion of it.
You raise an interesting, oh, sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
You raise an interesting, so the conversation we're having, like, this is the conversation that presenters have. What is going on in the city? How do we fit in this world? What is the politics? Blah, blah, blah. Like, we're having this macro ecological conversation around the cultural ecosystem. That's generally not a conversation that artists are having, not because they're not interested in it, but because they're in the studio making, or they're in the thing making. And I say that because to your point about, like, when you live in LA, you don't have Broadway looming, and there's a lot of people in New York who don't give a hoot about Broadway. But I think as an artist working in a city, an artist working anywhere in the world, one of the biggest challenges is creating your own definition of success and what that looks like to you. And I say that because if to you, success means building work that is going to tour internationally to festivals, then there are a set of questions, concerns, and relationships that you probably want to be thinking about. And it will change and vary depending on what your interests are and what you're trying to do. But certainly I think that one of the reasons that like political work in Mexico doesn't make it up here is because we haven't built grassroots political relationships to talk about that. And there's a dramaturgical piece too, which is, you know, colonialist dramaturgy. And that's a whole huge, but as an artist, but sometimes I think, has anybody seen, did anybody go see Fun Home? Yes. Okay, so Lisa Kron started out in the 80s in the East Village with the 5 lesbian brothers, making work with lesbians for lesbians because she didn't have anywhere else in the market to go. We didn't think, well, I'm not that old, but like they didn't think in terms of market, right? She had a bunch of stories to tell to a bunch of people in her community whose voices weren't being represented. And they said, fuck it, if no one's gonna let me tell my stories, I'm gonna tell them we're gonna tell them together. It took 20 some odd years, but it finally made it to Broadway, to the Tonys, where they sang the song about the keys, and lesbians across America went, oh, thank God. You know, and I think that's important to remember that arc. Like, what is your goal? Like, is your goal to like speak truth to power in your community because it's gentrifying? Is it to like you're saying, like, is it like, that is a myth I found, like, in the time I've been here, that not everybody is trying to have a showcase to get booked on a sitcom. Like, people are trying to make work. But I think that, like, as an artist, you have to ask yourself, what does success look like for me? What am I trying to do, both as an artist and as a cultural worker who has to pay the bills and fits into this ecosystem, and let that drive your choices.
Can I just, one thing to add? Coming to LA, and going to a new venue as well, the thing I hear, is a lot of reasons why things can't happen. A lot of reasons why that won't work. You can have a bar in the front of the house, but they never stay for a drink. You can, because they want to go home. Or everyone's driving, so that because they're driving, means you won't get walk-up. You know, there's so many things that make you think, oh, Ben, you know, and you could say, oh, I won't do that, then I won't do that. I won't. And I think the only thing I would say with LA is that, you know, I don't want to be anything like a Broadway place. I don't want to be, when I was in England, I didn't want to work in the West End. I never worked in the West End because it didn't work for me. It wasn't the place I wanted my work to go. And I think that within LA, the film industry, the TV industry is an excuse sometimes for why things won't work in theatre or why they, and I think we've got to just ignore that. And for me, when anyone ever says to me that won't work, it gives me even more reason why I want to make the thing happen. So I think, you know, and particularly, and again, you know, Beverly Hills is a unique place to be making theatre. But I actually also think it's an opportunity to break down what people perceive of, you know, Beverly Hills to be, and make work there that actually should be made in LA. And one of the things we're trying to do in the Wallis is make work that is representative and reflects the city of LA, not just the city of Beverly Hills, because that wouldn't last long. But it is important that we, you know, we do. But we also that thing about, you know, people telling you why something can't work is something that does seem to happen here a lot. And I know, if you haven't got a car park, you won't get anyone coming. If you haven't got, you know, all those things, oh, they won't cross the 405. I mean, there's so many things that I've been told since I've been here that and it makes you, and so when I said, well, my first season is going to have 320 performances in the year rather than the 200 we had last season, it won't work. Too many shows. There's not an audience for it. There's not, you know, and they're not necessarily wrong, but we're certainly getting more people coming now than ever before. But I'm going to keep going with that because I think that if we don't keep making as much work as we possibly can, and we don't keep pushing those boundaries, and we don't keep believing that you can change the mindset of people and change the way you think, and be challenged yourself as well. I mean, you know, it's good to be challenged as an individual. And that's the exciting thing about coming to a completely new city, from my point of view, and starting those new relationships, which I do agree it is the core of everything. So I think that's the one thing, in terms of the TV, film thing, we've just got to believe that actually there's something there that we can do. Yeah.
Well, to that, which is sort of a conversation about aesthetics, which, you know, the knowledge base of the people making decisions on one coast and the value systems in which they value their work is really different here in LA. The way that work is made, how we look to the west, how we look to the south, this really wonderful world of burgeoning immersive theater that's happening all over the city, the state of innovation that's happening here, the fact that we have this golden age of like television shows because all the playwrights have now moved to Los Angeles. People are moving here because there's something really exciting that they want. And how can we value it on those terms versus, well, this is the system that is built within New York City versus the venues, and I'm really overgeneralizing, but it'd be really interesting, and thank you, Andy, for articulating specifically about, this is a conversation about how presenters talk, and if you want to be if you're a theater that you're producing work and you want to go on tour or have a relationship, like there's a set of questions to ask, and I think that also comes down to relationships, and I'm wondering if you guys can articulate when you first came to LA, what you were surprised by, but also how does someone in this audience have a relationship with you to start thinking about doing work together?
Alcohol is always very helpful. I actually want to.
For sure, that's very important.
Essential.
Yeah, yeah. And also now that, you know, it's legal here. But actually, Paul, I did the same thing. Like I like tripled the programming, and some of it worked, some of it did. But creating that density, I think, was really a great experiment. I think the best way is to reach out. Do you mind going, if I go off a little bit on things? So I want to flog my dead horse that I flog all the time, which is writing. You asked us, like, what do we read, the time, whatever. I didn't read any of it because I've spent so long writing it, and I just don't trust it. If we want to, you know, it's a long story. You can buy me a drink later, and I'll tell you the whole story. But if we want to articulate a different vision of what the thing is that's happening here, then you need people to write about it. You need people to write about it and to contextualize it, just like in the visual arts or music. Like when you talk about when the Beach Boys happened, all of a sudden there were like people were writing about, well, this is why it sounds that way, or like like the difference between West Coast jazz and East Coast jazz. So it's like, and this is not LA specific, this is around the world. Nobody does the writing about the work, they only want to make the work. And I understand, but at the end of the day, and also you guys, Ben is your best friend because Ben is one of the great arts advocates in the country, and he's here in LA fighting for you and bringing you on the world stage. So give him a round of applause.
So I was just reminded really quickly, we have to be out of here by 4:30, and yeah, so I was just moving to exactly that. So thank you for and so we wanted to table the question I just asked, and if there's time, we'll answer it, or we can ask it offline. But does anybody have questions? And I'm gonna pick out, and you're gonna stand up and ask your question. So we'll start there. The woman in the black shirt.
Hi, my name's Lieberman. I'm a playwright, and I'm a recipient of a Fringe scholarship. And thank you, because I'm proud of being a fourth-generation Angelino, but and see my city change so much and become a theater town. And what I'm especially proud of, and I think I just want to share this, and you can speak to it or not, and share some hope, but 10 years ago I started what became the country's youngest Shakespeare troupe, and it lives in Los Angeles. And we started with my daughter and a little girl from the Royal, she was the daughter of someone from the Royal Shakespeare Company, and they were 4 years old, and we just threw them lines from the Tempest, and they wanted more. They wanted more. They didn't want Barbies, and they wanted more Shakespeare. And so we serve 300 children in Los Angeles. You give us our grants, and we all class lines, race lines. We're in West Adams, South LA, Hollywood, and East LA, but we all come to one venue, and they're all under one roof, and all they care about is Shakespeare and theater. And they've been scouted by casting and producers, and just today a kid came over and I had to put her on tape. She's like, "This is too easy. I gotta go back and do Shakespeare." You know, to them, like, Shakespeare's easy. So they have a passion for theater, and our challenge is, we rehearsed here too, like, we're always kind of homeless. We always are looking for the real brick and mortar, or for that one funder that's gonna give us a theater. And I don't know where it's gonna happen, but I know that, there's children coming up now that have a passion for theater that are Angelinos. So I just wanted to share that, and you could speak to that, or.
I just see that as an opportunity for someone
Yes.
to make that happen.
Yes.
What's the name of your group?
The Los Angeles Drama Club, LosAngelesDramaClub.com. Please go visit our website.
My instinct whenever anyone says they want a home, a brick and mortar home, I always cringe.
Yeah, it's scary.
Because and I was speaking to someone earlier, it's a beast that you constantly have to feed. I mean, I know there's a lot of positive benefits out of it as well. And there was a company that I represented in LA, dance theater company, and they toured extensively nationally and internationally. And what I did with the presenters in Los Angeles is I moved them around at every venue all around. So it's like, yeah, there's a lot of value in that, because you can keep going back to the trough, here, instead of me calling up, "Hey, Carolyn, will you do this again? And by the way, it's the same repertory, and I need more money." I can move around and do that, and then come back to Carolyn at another time. So there's it's like this freedom in homelessness.
I would also say that you'd have an opportunity with the model where it's, say you had 3 venues that you partner with, and align your mission with their mission. That will help you. What's interesting, I was just at a convening of presenters, and we had this mind-blowing conversation with Liz Lerman. She was our keynote speaker, and we were talking about the burden of having a physical plant, and that some of the most exciting work that we're seeing as presenters coming through actually doesn't work in a 500-seat proscenium house. It needs to be in a field, like Ann Carlson's piece with the doggy Hamlet with sheep. I can't do that in my venue. It's really cool though. So you actually have a gift in many ways in not having to maintain the lights, the insurance, all of that.
I'm going to...
Not to mention that some of the most exciting theater that I see in Los Angeles, like, you know, God bless all these beautiful houses, is in totally unlikely places. And ultimately, I think this, you know, immersive, environmental, whatever you want to call it, theater that we're seeing all over the place, that's the real future of theater. I think that's what, you know, the kids want to see these days, is they want to be out and seeing, like, how can you make Shakespeare unique? How can you make it applicable to people who are 21 years old and they're watching whatever 21-year-olds people watch. But like, I used to be cool. But like, I think freeing yourself of the brick and the mortar and the stage and the insurance and the lights and all of these things, like allows you at the same time more artistic freedom and lower overhead. So I think being a traveling band of theater going in interesting new places will actually get you significantly more press and attention than coming and doing it with the proscenium and seats and stuff like that. So
and one other thing, maybe there's a notion that you can become a company in residence somewhere, and basically you get them to like do all the, keep the lights on, and you come in. And I think given your program, that would be considered an asset to numerous organizations.
And there's room for world-class, great-staged proscenium theater and really world-class innovative. So there's a lot of questions, and I'm going to go through you, sir, because you called me out.
One of the problems I think nowadays, things are so expensive. See, it's very expensive putting on shows, and we used to run a theater in the early 70s. Were you around then? In the early 70s, right where Supercuts is now on Santa Monica, south of La Brea, south of Santa Monica. And we did shows bare stage. We did musical, ran 6 months. And it was a whole different time then. You know, our rent was $110 a month. You know, so things were different now, and expenses to run a show is very difficult. But we found, I'm going to make this very quick, you want to get bigger audiences, hire local actors who were born here, the more Jewish people connected with the production, the larger the audiences are. And, you know, just do shows like the Fringe. Why the Fringe is so successful? Because, well, it's only 3 weeks, you know, but the shows are bare stage, just like this. You can see something great bare stage. I went to see, my wife and I wrote many shows, produced a lot of shows here and in New York, Staten Island mainly. And, you know, we saw some great things here, but bare stage. We go see some shows here, and I see a living room set makes our living room look like a ghetto apartment, you know. So, you know, spending a lot of money on certain things when they could maybe use that money, you know, to better advantage. Although they say, well, you have to have it because the audience is, you know, but I just don't believe that. But anyway.
I'm just going to take something from the back. The back row. Stand up, the red shirt.
Hi, I'm Leanne, and I wanted to sort of bring up the question of multilingual theater. Indeed, this is quite a capital of arts now. And with the exception of theater being done in Spanish and English, and there's theater in this town in Armenian, Russian, Japanese, what are we doing? And American Sign Language. And American Sign Language, absolutely. What are we doing, you all collectively and us, to become a center for multilingual theater?
Well, as far as for Encuentro de las Américas, that was language is a huge thing for me, and I know you called out Spanish and English, which is an obvious thing, but we were also looking at native languages as well. So we were looking at work that could be presented, you know, and there are some shows that have 3 languages, that have 4 languages, one show that has no language at all, but it's a theater piece, you know. So that was also very important for us to have that representation of language. And for every show that we have, it's mandatory that every show will have super titles. So if it's in English, it's going to be in Spanish. If it's in Spanish, it's going to be English because of the nature of this particular festival. I don't think we can do super titles for no language, but That's a thought. But also, ASL as well. And I know that, for instance, like Casa 0101 in Boyle Heights, they also take that into consideration as well. They have someone who works with them extensively, to incorporate ASL into more and more theater productions that they do for that particular community.
And we've just done a co-production with Deaf West where we did exactly that, and we made a piece of work, an Edward Albee piece, that had deaf actors performing as well as. Well, the Spring Awakening as well actually came from the Wallis, but this was the Edward Albee at Home at the Zoo that we've just done, which was very different, and it was fascinating actually making that work, because making work with deaf actors, there were things about how that production was made which was enlightening from my point of view. Coming from the UK, one of the things that was very strong in the UK at the moment is the whole idea, not necessarily around language necessarily, but around disability and about access and how theatre should be made by as many people as possible. And I think that's something that I think Deaf West is unique actually for here, but I think it's something that should also be part of that conversation. And going back to my 20 years ago, I was told this wouldn't work, and we tried it. But we made a piece of work with a Spanish company in Barcelona, and we had both English and Spanish on stage at the same time in Leeds, in Yorkshire, and it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing, and that particular piece of work, which I was told for 6 months would never work, then went to Edinburgh, Paris, and a bunch of places. And so I think you're absolutely right. There is opportunity here, and we should be reflecting that. I mean, from my point of view, in terms of a performing arts centre, not as a theatre, we're trying to do that as well through dance and music as well, and trying to find that diversity. But we're certainly this year, next season, we're bringing the Persian community into our theatre, and we've got 2 pieces of work that will be, I hope, both interesting to them, but also interesting to other audiences as well. So I think you're absolutely right. The whole idea of diversity, the whole idea of language and sharing languages and breaking down those barriers are really important challenges as theatre makers.
I actually want to throw it back a little to the artists in the room, because I think, first of all, to the disability thing, we brought this, almost a year ago at Skirball, we brought this wonderful British performer named Jess Tom, who performs as Tourette's Hero.
Oh, yeah.
And she's got very severe Tourette's, and she's done this solo show called Tourette's Hero Breakfast in Biscuit Land, or Biscuit Land, and it was brilliant. And it really blew people's minds, because not too many people are exposed to it. And we did what's called a relaxed performance, where we really changed the rules of the space, and we had a lot of people across the neurodiverse spectrum in the house, and that really changed the energy. It really pushed us as a presenter to really think about how to be inclusive and equitable. We had ASL there, and it was kind of amazing. So I think as presenters, we definitely, and it's actually, some of the older folks will realize this, younger folks won't. It's kind of an amazing moment that so many presenters actually are really concerned about inclusion. And I know it's been a conversation that's been happening for 20, 30, 40 years, but it's actually an extraordinary moment where so many people in positions of ability to do something are. But to the language question, I think it's a great, great question. I actually wonder if there's an artistic answer to that. Like we can do super titles, we can do present more dance and music, but what does it mean to to go into a community, the Armenian community or the Persian community or this community or that community, and work with local artists there and put people with different languages together and struggle with the issues of languages, and how is there an artistic way to approach the problem of language? And if we're a truly global city, which Los Angeles is, then this is this extraordinary opportunity. And how can we look to other countries where, in the Middle East, or India, where there's hundreds of languages. So I think it's a great place for an artist to actually start going, how do we tackle this question as artists?
I'm going to take a question from over here, right down in front.
Hi, I'm Xander Aroff. My question is about getting more emerging artists involved. So I've noticed with bigger theaters that there's pre-show entertainment. I know at the Broad, we used to have live sketches before Shakespeare shows, and when my mom performs with the Long Beach Symphony, sometimes they have emerging college musicians perform in the lobby beforehand. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on some of the larger venues, how we can get more
or presented as the show, not just as before the show. Thoughts?
Well,
Emerging artists, supporting emerging
yeah,
theater
I think
artists.
I think it's a great idea, and we're trying to do that. One of the things I've always believed, and I'm still in this first year, so I'm trying to not get everything done in 1 year, though. You know. But again, for the 12 years when I was at Knee-High, we talked about how we wanted to sort of manage the event from the minute someone got out of the car to the minute they got back in the car. So it wasn't just that point when they were sitting in a seat, but it was everything from the start of that to the back of that. Now, it was easy for us to do that, or easier for us to, as a company without a building, which actually, going back to that, it was great not having a building. But we built a tent, and we built it in a field, and we had events happening all the way through to get to that performing space, and then we had events afterwards, and there was bar going and food and all those other things as well, and barbecues and fires at night, and then things on the beach. And I think that the idea of that is great from my point of view. To create events is actually as interesting and exciting as it's not just about that one moment when you're sitting in the seat and you're looking at the performance or standing and looking at the performance. So, and having any artists, emerging artists or whatever, involved in that whole thing is a great idea. And so we're trying to explore that a lot at the moment in terms of what we can do pre-show, what we can do post-show, and what we can do in terms of just animating a campus as much as just getting a performance happening in a theatre space.
I think there could be more, though, in LA. I think there could be a lot more advocacy for or support of or developing programs for younger artists.
We
sure.
with the festival that we have, I actually put out a really big call to a pool of people that I know, and which grows out to people that I don't know, calling for work, whether it was for a reading or for a dance piece or from type of installation or experiential type of experiential experience, you guys. To just throw that stuff out to me. And I created the survey where I sent this out, and I wanted to see what emerging artists had to contribute to this particular festival, and to look at the art that is being made in all different types of mediums. And I am purposely having big chunks of within the festival that are just dedicated 100% to emerging artists, or for pieces that are I really want to be able to have the audience that's going to be here for the festival be able to listen to all the readings that that my company has, or that I have, or whatever, or to see this piece of work or whatever it is. Also, I love your outfit. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, I love it too. Actually, I guess my question to you, my question in general is, who is an emerging artist and who is not? What defines an emerging artist? What context are we using, and what vocabulary we're using to define who or what is emerging, and where's that coming from? So I'm just kind of throwing that on the table, that whole idea of emerging and and our perception of that concept.
And there's also the whole concept of a lot of emerging artists are creating work in their own context and could care less if we're picking them or working with you as well. So own all that as well. There's a question by Michael.
Emeritus status at Brand Performance Director. I've been in Los Angeles nonprofit arts for 50 years, starting with dance, and it always surprised me that we did not have the theater community going to the booking conferences that my presenter colleagues up here have talked about, that LA's theater community has not seemingly known about the presenting thing. It's almost been absent of it. And I think that part of the problem comes back to the question of philanthropy. Los Angeles has 1/13 the philanthropic assets of the Bay Area on a per capita basis. And it has a direct impact on theater companies' ability to do the long-term planning and putting the kind of resources into being ready to go out on the road. And I think that these are challenges that the collective between presenters and producers, particularly mid-sized nonprofit producers, need to be working together to try and figure out how do we overcome the challenge that is going to continue for, I'm afraid, quite a while, which is the philanthropic one and the role that it plays in getting great Los Angeles product out of the county.
Towards the back, the woman with your hand right there.
I was just wondering if we could take a moment to talk about award shows. I'm fairly new to the LA theater scene, and I've heard about
Thoughts about award shows?
I want to take on the word quality, because that's really, really tricky. And it goes into the sort of class of words, rigor,
excellence,
excellence, that are world class, that are super problematic. So be careful what you wish for, because when you start saying about quality, then you're opening up a sort of Pandora's box. Also, one of the great necessities for success is failure. And if you create a climate where you feel that people aren't gonna, that if you're not quote unquote quality, that you have to not fit. I mean, San Francisco has a different problem, right? San Francisco's problem used to be like, oh, how was that? Oh man, that was like you couldn't fail, because no matter how bad you were, you couldn't fail because it's very supportive. On the flip side, it's like, on the flip side, there's like places where like all you can do is fail. So I guess I don't feel like, I think award shows, and I apologize for my New York centrism, it's just basically what I know. Something like the Obies worked because it was a community-driven thing that the Village Voice at one point sponsored, when it was a very small group of people awarding each other their peers. And it wasn't like for excellence. And there's this big festival in Berlin called Theatertreffen, and they have these critics that travel all around the country, and it's not for excellence or quality, it's actually for like what's notable. So there's so many different criteria for how we can evaluate and engage with and interpret and respond to work. Quality is tricky. But if you're talking about award shows as a way to sort of bring a community together and acknowledge the work that everyone does and try and have a meaningful discussion about what moved us and what didn't move us, I think that's a different proposition that has value.
I have a suggestion or an idea, it just came to me. If you all wrote about the shows that you love, like in a really deep and thoughtful way, and put it on Facebook or emailed it to people, that would be so powerful. You know, I think people take a moment to like write a bad review because they're pissed off about service or things like that, but people so rarely write about things they love. And if we were all advocates for the work, it would be so amazing. And you know, to put it within, you know, like Paul, we present multiple genres, and so if we can't tick a box in theater, we do it in dance or classical opera. But I just lost my thought. It was brilliant. Shoot, I had. Yes. Oh, no, this was what it was. So there's a dance company that we're partnered with Santa Monica College. So we don't actually operate our space 365 days a year. So we only can have 200, so we program them. But one of the great things about this relationship is that we can connect with the college and their students. And we brought in a dance company that we were like, oh, do you want to do a master class? And they said, yes. We want to reach out to the English department, and we want to do a master class on how to write about dance, because we are so afraid that people are not going to keep writing about it. And I just thought that was so genius. So just 2 cents.
You touched on something wonderful that I think that extends to much of what we do in theater right now, and it's this question of the democratization of quality. Like before, when we were talking about awards shows, you know, there was a few people that would make judgment on the masses because those few people were experts and they could identify quality. And we're seeing the same thing in press right now. Is that as people say, so what do you think of the Los Angeles Theater Press? And I say, there's a Los Angeles Theater Press. So the real question is, what replaces the Los Angeles Theater Press? And actually, it's a wonderful thing. It's the opinions of people on social media, on writing on sites like Facebook and on the Hollywood Fringe site and on, about how they feel about something. And you can look at these questions en masse. And I think that's much more informative. And I think it's much more informative than some theater critic telling me it's great than you, a friend, coming to me and telling me it's great. I'm much more likely to believe you. And having the social networks that we have now, this becomes realistic. And I think you can apply this metaphor to so many more things when these questions of quality are moved from an elite few to a democratized many, then that is only healthy for our ecosystem.
I just wanted to end with an artist here who wants to make a comment about this.
Yes, something that I think pertains to a lot of different things that we've all been talking about is how do we keep our audiences
Great, and thank you for that. And we're not going to do any responses because we have to get out of this, but we're going to take this conversation to the streets. And if people need to talk to somebody, you can find them out there. But thank you, everybody, for coming today. Thank you for the panel. Thank you to the Hollywood Fringe, and thank you for the artists who are continuing being artists.